Hi, I'm Robin.
And I'm Chris. Together we're the Gen X couple.
Hey guys.
Take one. Hello, everyone.
Today we're going to talk about one of the most mysterious figures of the 20th century. He held no official military rank. There's no confirmed photograph of him, no service record anyone can point to with certainty, and yet during World War II he appeared everywhere. Scratched into walls, scrawled inside ships, written in chalk across Europe and the Pacific, painted on tanks. He was even marked on bombs. His name was Kilroy, or at least that's what everyone said. And I have to say, other than that song, Mr. Roboto from Styx from the 80s, I had no idea what this was. This was something that Christian brought to my attention, and it's super interesting. So thank you for bringing this up, because I enjoyed learning about it as I was making notes.
So the phrase that followed him was simply, Kilroy was here. It showed up in the most unlikely places, on the beaches of Normandy, inside newly captured bunkers, in abandoned German barracks, on Pacific Island strongholds, sometimes in places that seemed physically impossible to access without serious risk. Soldiers would clear a building, secure it, and within minutes, someone would leave the mark, almost like painting a flag. The strange thing is, nobody could ever quite prove who Kilroy was.
Yeah, so before we go deeper into the legend, let's describe the image itself. Because when people think of Kilroy, they don't just think of the words, they think of the drawing. It's a simple cartoon. It's a bald head, 2 round eyes, a long nose hanging over a wall, sometimes 2 hands gripping over the edge. The character appears to be peeking over something as if spying or watching. There's no body, just the top of the head and fingers. It's very minimal, almost childlike and innocent. But during World War II, that doodle became a symbol recognized by millions of Allied troops.
And the timeline matters. The phrase began appearing widely among American servicemen by 1942 and 1943. And by 1944, it was everywhere the U.S. forces were deployed, Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific Theater. It was most common among U.S. Army and Navy personnel, but Allied soldiers from Britain and Australia and Canada too. And sometimes they added their own variations, but the American version with that distinct long nose peeking over the wall became the most famous. It's what's interesting is that Kilroy didn't come out of nowhere.
Very true. He had cousins. In Britain during World War II, during World War I and the interwar years, there was a similar doodle known as Mr. Chad. The British version also showed a bald head peeking over a wall, often with phrases underneath like "What?" W-O-T, "What? No sugar?" or "What? No tea?" reflecting wartime shortages. In Australia, a comparable figure was known as Foo, F-O-O, which is what I call my kids sometimes instead of fool. I call them a foo, like Mr. T would say it. Anyway, so the visual concept already existed, but the American name and phrase gave it a new identity and a new cultural life during World War II. Yes, 2. I don't know why I'm having trouble distinguishing between 1 and 2.
So the most widely accepted American origin story centers on a real man, James J. Kilroy. He was a shipyard inspector in Quincy, Massachusetts. During World War II, the Fore River shipyard in Quincy was producing Liberty ships and other naval vessels at a rapid pace. Kilroy's job was to inspect rivets. Ship sections were built in
That was a tongue twister. Ship sections.
And later welded together. Workers were paid by the number of rivets installed, so inspectors marked sections after verifying the work to prevent double counting. And Kilroy reportedly began writing Kilroy was here in chalk after completing an inspection. When these sections were sealed and assembled, the chalk marks sometimes ended up inside the compartments that were completely inaccessible once construction was finished.
So when sailors boarded a brand new ship and found Kilroy was here written inside a sealed compartment, it seemed impossible, right? It looked like someone had gotten inside before the ship was even completed. The phrase took an almost supernatural quality on. It suggested that Kilroy had somehow beaten them there, and from there the phrase spread like wildfire.
Soldiers began writing Kilroy was here wherever they went. It became a morale booster, a joke, and a challenge. Who could leave Kilroy's mark in the most daring location? Inside a captured German pillbox along the Normandy beach, on the Siegfried Line, or on the island of Iwo Jima, in an abandoned Japanese position across the Pacific? There were even accounts of it being written on bombs before air missions. Alongside pin-up art and personal messages, crews sometimes added, Kilroy was here. And that meant Kilroy was literally falling from the sky over Axis territory. And humor becomes an armor in wartime, and Kilroy was armor.
So I'm a little confused. Was it an image, or was it the words Kilroy was here?
I think it
or
was
it
both.
You know what the image reminds me of? Do you know the image I'm talking about? It kind of looks like Ziggy. Do you know the Ziggy cartoons?
Yeah.
It kind of looks like the top of Ziggy's head. And I don't remember if he had a long nose, but you older folks like us should know who Ziggy is. Anyway, sorry. I'm losing my voice because this is our third podcast in a row. And when I talk too much, my voice goes hoarse. But anyway, there's also a famous story involving one of the worst humans to ever walk the planet, Adolf Hitler. According to post-war accounts, when German intelligence encountered Kilroy was here across multiple battlefronts, they became concerned. The story claims that Hitler demanded to know who Kilroy was, suspecting he might be an Allied spy or a code name for a high-level operative. There's no definitive archived proof that Hitler personally investigated Kilroy, but the story did spread among Allied troops and became part of the legend. And honestly, it captures the psychological effect that the phrase had.
Yeah, when you see the name everywhere, especially in places that are supposedly secure, it creates uneasiness.
Yeah.
It sends a message. We're ahead of you. We've already been here. And even if it wasn't intended as a psychological warfare, it still functioned that way.
Yeah, and think about the soldiers themselves. World War II involved a massive troop movement. Millions of young Americans, many of whom were like babies, 19 and 20 years old, were deployed overseas. They were so far from home, immersed in unfamiliar cultures, and facing unimaginable stress. A shared joke can carry enormous weight in that kind of an environment. And writing Kilroy was here was a way of saying, we made it. We survived. We got here first. And it was also a small act of defiance.
And that anonymity is key.
Anonymity?
There wasn't a single author claiming credit. Once the phrase spread, anyone could write it. It became communal folklore.
Communal?
Folklore thrives during war. Soldiers created slangs, songs, rituals, and symbols. Kilroy fit perfectly into that ecosystem. It required no rank and no permission, just chalk or pencil in a wall.
After the war, Kilroy didn't disappear either. In 1946, the American Transit Association sponsored a contest to identify the real Kilroy. James J. Kilroy came forward with documentation from the shipyard and reportedly won a trolley car as his prize. The Smithsonian Institution later recognized him as the likely origin of the American phrase, though the doodle itself had earlier roots overseas. Kilroy appeared in comic strips and pop culture throughout the late 1940s and 50s. By the time of the Korean War, troops were still using the phrase because by that point it had become tradition.
And in a way, Kilroy may have been one of the earliest examples of viral culture. There was no internet, no advertising campaign, no central coordination, just a phrase and a doodling spread organically across continents because people found it meaningful and funny. It was a participatory avenue. You didn't just see Kilroy, you became part of Kilroy by writing it yourself.
There's also something deeper happening, really. Graffiti throughout history often serves as testimony. From ancient Roman walls to modern cities, people carve or write their names as proof of existence. Think back to the cavemen. Kilroy fits into that tradition. Except instead of a single individual naming space, it became a collective identity, a shared signature of sorts for millions of ordinary soldiers whose names might never appear in history books.
And that might be the most powerful part of the story. War is often remembered through generals and presidents, but the experience belongs to ordinary people. Writing Kilroy was here was a way of saying, I stood here, I existed in this moment. It's simple and it's very profound.
Yeah, and it's a playful image too. The bald head peeking over a wall. It almost feels symbolic. And like I said, more playful. It's almost like Ziggy. And I think, honestly, what makes it the most remarkable is that it became one of the most recognizable symbols of a global conflict defined by some of the most intense combat in human history.
And by the 1960s, Kilroy had become nostalgic. Veterans referencing it in their memoirs. It appeared in historical retrospects. It became part of the mythology that we now call the Greatest Generation. And even today, if you see a little face peeking over a wall, you might instantly recognize it as Kilroy.
Yeah, because folklore doesn't disappear. It hangs around. Like I said, at the end of Mr. Roboto, he says, I am Kilroy at the end of the song, which I know Mr. Roboto was part of a longer rock opera. Like I know that whole album was supposed to be one continuous story, and I don't know any of the other songs on the album. I just know Mr. Roboto. But basically, Kilroy may or may not have been one man, but the legend belonged to everyone who wrote it, from the shipyard chalkboards in Massachusetts to the beaches of Normandy, or even the islands of the Pacific.
And wherever soldiers stood, wherever they survived, wherever they wanted to leave proof they made it through, they did.
Yeah, because Kilroy was there.
And somehow he still is to this day.
True. And that's it, you guys. Do I have anything to share? Oh, I should share, if I think of it. I'm so bad with social media. If I think of it, I'll put a picture of the doodle on our Threads, Facebook, and Instagram. It's very simple. It's cute. And that's it.
All right. See you later, alligator.
In a wild crocodile.